About 4 seasons ago, I hit a wall in Marvel Snap where I could not break past the top 5,000 to 1,000 range. A large reason for this was because I simply did not know how to deck build. However, after some trial and error, I found a method to turn cope decks into cooks. And in this video, I will be sharing you the method that allowed me to go from top 1,000 to top 10. So what is this method? This method is a method of categorizing cards at multiple different levels so I understand the relative deck building cost I'm giving up to include a card in my deck and how I could build synergies around that and what cards are exactly asking me. If you saw one of my last videos on deck building, I explained how I often ask questions and then propose answers, and that's how I build decks. This is an expansion on that. More specifically, it's looking closer at the exact type of synergies I'm looking at and then processing those types of synergies so I can ask better questions. The first and most overrated level I look at is inclusion cost cards. What inclusion cost cards are to me are a set of cards that are required to be ran together to achieve their payoff. The easiest way to look at this is through the lens of Darkhawk, where Darkhawk is your payoff and you have to run Korg and Rockslide to achieve that payoff. Hence, Korg and Rockslide are inclusion cost synergies because they are necessary to run Darkhawk. The application of this is that they are built around cards that are static deck building costs for their archetype. If you want to play Darkhawk, you have to include Rockslide and Korg. If you want to play Gilgamesh, you have to include Blue Marvel. If you want to play Ajax, you have to include Hazmat. These are the type of cards that are inclusion costs. Why I think inclusion costs are overrated, even though they're often considered what we consider packages, is because inclusion costs are asking a lot of you. They don't give you a lot of deck building choice. They don't give you a lot of value usually. They are what the devs have prescribed as balanced synergies that work well together, but often they just don't do enough and are asking too much of you from a deck building perspective that some more soft synergies end up being better. However, there are times where the payoff is so good, like a 4-0 Darkhawk was just so good that you play it anyways because the card is that good. Back when Hazmat was 2 cost and Ajax was like one of the best 5s in the game, the same effect happened. So inclusion costs are sometimes worth building around, but they are the least valuable from a deck building perspective unless they are extremely pushed and extremely strong in an extremely strong state. The second category I look at is what I call super synergies. Super synergies are a lot like the previous category of inclusion costs, but they are a bit less prescriptive, even though a lot of the time it's very clear where the super synergies are. What I define as a super synergy is packages that are centered around one key card, but they don't necessarily need that one key card to function, and they just uplift a already great card. The best example of this is Merlin and how Werewolf makes Merlin way better. However, Merlin's just a good card in of himself. And then something with like the Sentry and the Void. Merlin's Pearly More spell makes that Sentry Void combo really, really potent. And I consider both of those a super synergy with Merlin. The key difference here is that super synergies are a bit less prescriptive. When you're playing a Darkhawk deck, Darkhawk is basically asking you to draw all of the pieces to work. So it's like, I need to draw Korg, I need to draw Rockslide, I need to draw Darkhawk to get all that value. Whereas if I'm playing a super synergy deck, I draw Merlin, I draw Werewolf, I'm getting a bunch of value just from that very, very potent combo. I draw Merlin, I draw Sentry, I'm getting a bunch of value from that potent combo. If I draw all 3, great. If I don't draw all 3, I'm still getting a bunch of value. So there is a bit less of a draw demand in these super synergies. In application, this means it's a lot easier to build around these super synergies because if you can find like 2 really good synergies, you can make a really good deck because they are now you have 2 powerful interactions. That's enough to reshape how you want to build a deck. And you might include from other categories at this point, but the super synergies are often my building block into creating better decks. Good examples of this are Merlin, Werewolf, Sentry, as I already explained. And then you can see other examples with Bullseye, how he shifted the entire discard into Bullseye discard. People don't really run Dracula discard anymore. That's because Bullseye's super synergy was so good with Dakin, Frigga, and then Morbius that entire deck just shifted around him to very much make him the key part of that deck. And a newer deck we're seeing is Kid Omega is so potent that these Nimrod Black Panther decks are coming back into play because his combos with both the Nimrod line and Black Panther are so good that you can justify basically the entire deck now. The third category I look at is what I call early enablers. What early enablers are the stacking or similar card effects that enable many payoffs. What I mean by similar card effects, maybe you have a Zabu and a Surge and you really want to play your 4s down. Often Zabu and Surge play a similar card effect when you end up drawing that 4 on turn 3 because you will be able to play that 4 on turn 3 with either of them down, so it's a similar enough card effect to achieve the end goal you want. What I mean by stacking card effect is similarly, if you play Zabu and Surge, now you're drawing that 4 drop and it costs 2. That's a stacking card effect where you can play both of them, you can play one of them, and you're going to achieve that end goal. But when you play both of them, you push that end goal even further, and now you're just really, really ahead. In application, what the stacking of early enablers that do a lot of similar things do is create consistent sources of early power spikes, because Zabu's an early power spike because you can get your 4 down early, Surge is an early power spike because you can get your 4 down early, and then if you have both of them, it's a even bigger power spike because you can get your 4s at 2, which helps you way later in the game, as well as getting that 4 down early. Examples of super synergies are, as I discussed, Zabu Surge with the 4s. There's another good super synergy is Balchok, Scream, and Craven. Often Balchok, Scream, and Craven, you're playing like Sam Wilson, a couple movies and all that, and Balchok and Scream are just such good early game cards that you end up getting super ahead by just starting to move your cards, and then they are scaling at such a high level that often you are able to just bully your opponent out of the game. Another even better example of this for power wise that you just kind of snowball the game with is Aranya, Madame Web, and Iron Fist. All of those allow you still to play Frigga after your Human Torch is scaling, but Aranya, Madame Web, and Iron Fist often allow you to start scaling your cards to hit a big level, and if you draw basically any 2 of these, you just scale super quickly that often your opponent has trouble keeping up. Fourth category that I look at is what I call premium payoffs. What premium payoffs are a set of cards with similar scaling conditions. An example of this is Sage, Captain Carter, and Human Torch. Why this is a good example is Human Torch literally says if you fill this lane, double my power. What Captain Carter says is if you put more cards in my lane, her power goes up and her scaling basically becomes better the more cards are in the lane. And then Sage also literally says the more cards of different power is a caveat there, but the more cards in this lane, the bigger I become. So all of them are scaling off of filling lanes, which gives you a very clear identity of if I fill my lanes, these are going to scale well, which are premium payoffs because they all are asking to do the same thing, and they're all in of themselves very good cards to be wanting to use as a payoff. An important note of this category is that I consider premium payoffs only to be premium payoffs if the payoffs themselves are very good in their context. A good example of something that doesn't fit into this is how Brood, Captain Carter, and Human Torch are, in my mind, a premium payoff group, but Shaw does not fit into that premium payoff group because he just doesn't scale good enough to be included in that top echelon of premium payoffs like the other 3 are. In application, why this is a good thing to do is because it rewards continued investment in these conditional enablers that enable these premium payoffs. So let's say I'm playing a Sam Wilson to outfill my lane. I am rewarded for playing that Sam Wilson more so the more premium payoffs I'm playing that ask me to do the fill lane thing. So basically my Sam Wilson as an enabler becomes more and more consistent the more things that want me to fill lanes, which is why this is a good thing to do because it makes your enablers even stronger because more cards are asking to do that thing. Another example of this is if I play Gwenpool with Brood, the new Human Torch, and Captain Carter, and now I have 3 premium Gwenpool targets. It makes my Gwenpool a better enabler for these cards because the buffing is often going to be playing for more because I just have more very good targets. So basically this is reducing the deck building cost of your enablers because you have more premium payoffs for them, so they're rewarding you disproportionately more the more payoffs you have. Another example of this is how Ajax kind of very much invest in the Affliction thing, because Hazmat becomes a much better enabler if it's enabling Ajax, if it's enabling Diamondback, and if it's enabling Luke Cage, as opposed to just one of those. Now that we've hit the last level, I want to preface this with a caveat. The caveat is a lot of decks will include multiple of these levels, and often of the first 4 levels, at least 3 of them are included, the second, third, and fourth, if not 4 of them included. And this last level isn't even always included, and that's the caveat I want to make. So now, what is this last level? This last level is what I call final touches. They are just the bow you put at the end of your thing. They're usually not a part of your core engine, but they either bring your deck to the next level or help out against certain matchups. To help out against certain matchups, you usually include what I call non-engine cards, which are basically tech cards like Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Copycat, Mobius, or whatever to help you against certain matchups. Or you include what I call force multiplier cards, which are these conditional power spikes that push you way over the edge in certain cases. So in application, what force multipliers are these very conditional power spikes. For example, Frigga is only good when your Human Torch is scaling very well or your Sage is scaling very well, but when that condition is met and you Frigga that card, you basically win the game because you are so ahead because of that force multiplier. Another good example of this was Prodigy in those old Surfer decks, where you became very, very ahead because of Prodigy copying your Galacta or copying your Carter, but that only happened in games you were already drawing pretty well, and it just helped you push it over the top, so you almost guaranteed won that game. With that, I want to say that this choice between non-engine cards and force multipliers is ultimately up to you, and you should just do what's best for your deck. And with that, the video is over, and I want to thank you guys all for watching. If you haven't checked me out at twitch.tv Heart of the Card Snap, please check me out there. If not, I want to thank you for watching the video and hope to see you guys in the next video.